Can Zhen Huan, blessed with both beauty and talent, truly outshine all in the imperial harem and enjoy everlasting favor? This year's winter arrived unusually late, only feeling like the cold season after several heavy snowfalls in December. The snow continued for days, as soft as catkins or goose feathers. After admiring the snowscape from the window for a long time, feeling slightly dizzy, I turned to Xianling and said, "Si Lang had good intentions wanting to plant white plum trees in Tangli Palace. Unfortunately, after the snowfall, they blend in with the snowscape and can no longer be distinguished." He casually replied, "That's not a problem. If you like red plums, I will have people transplant some jade pistil and sandalwood heart plums from Ime Garden to your palace." He then looked up from his writing and said, "Hey, didn't you ask me to concentrate on transcribing without distraction? Why are you now the one disturbing my focus?" I couldn't help but laugh. How can there be such cheeky people? You're the one not focusing, and yet you blame others. Hearing this, he smiled. "If I hadn't lost 3 games of chess to you last night, I wouldn't be punished here today." I spoke softly. Si Lang is a man of his word. How could he go back on his promise in front of a mere woman like me? I sat down again, smiling warmly. "All right, aren't I also making clothes for you as a gift for the winter solstice?" He tenderly stroked my hair. "Going back on my word is one thing, but for the thoughtfulness of you tailoring clothes by hand, I wouldn't mind transcribing it 3 more times." I giggled and gave him a sidelong glance. "Remember, these are your words. Don't back out later." For the entire day, he transcribed poems and essays about plum blossoms from various dynasties for me, while I sat beside him, peacefully tailoring a garment for him to wear in winter. Outside, the cotton-like snow fell silently and ceaselessly. We had sent away the attendants early, and just the 2 of us sat together. In the large red-gold filigree incense burner on the floor, Bahué incense burned steadily, its fragrance unending and quietly permeating the depths of the warm chamber. Made from over 20 types of spices including agarwood and clove, mixed with alcohol, softened, and then blended with white honey, Bahué incense was specifically used in the winter months. Its warm, intoxicating fragrance filled the air, and combined with the heat from the underfloor heating, it made the chamber feel as warm and fragrant as a sea of flowers in the imperial gardens during spring. The use of Bahué incense began in the 3 Kingdoms period, and its preparation methods had been lost and scattered over time, making it a rare find in the palace. The Bahué incense used in Tangli Palace all came from Ling Rong. Before her father, and Bai Huai, became an official, he was involved in the spice trade and acquired many secret recipes for incense making. Knowing my love for fragrances, Ling Rong often came to discuss and experiment with me, and we enjoyed our conversations immensely. After several trials, we managed to recreate a recipe for Bahué incense. In the warm pavilion, all the windows facing south were large and covered with translucent paper, letting in the soft bluish-white light of the snow outside, brightening the entire hall. With him quietly sitting opposite me, the silence was so profound that I could hear the occasional gentle crackle from the high-quality red charcoal in the brazier, and even the sound of the snowflakes fluttering outside was distinctly audible. The underfloor heating in the pavilion was so warm that it made one slightly sweaty. Holding the needle and thread for a long time made my fingers a bit stiff, and fearing the sweat might stain the fine yellow silk satin, I called Jingqing over to bring water for washing my hands. Turning to Xianling with a smile, I said, "The nightgown can be tailored by me, but I must pass on the task of embroidering the coiled dragon pattern. My embroidery skills are nowhere near as good as Consort Anne's. It might be better to have her embroider it, don't you think?" Xianling replied. "What a finicky creature you are, having agreed to take on the task only to pass it off to someone else halfway through. I don't want anyone else meddling in this." I chuckled. "I've made it clear up front. If the stitches are too coarse and make it uncomfortable, don't blame me for being clumsy." After wiping my hands with a towel held by Jingqing, I took another towel and offered it to Xianling for him to wipe his face. However, he didn't reach out to take it, merely smiling. "You do it." So I went over and said with a smile, "All right, today I'll be the little palace maid serving the emperor. How about that?" He couldn't help but laugh. "You're being naughty." He had been writing for a long time, and fine beads of sweat had begun to form at his hairline. I carefully wiped them away for him and suggested, "Why don't you change into a different garment? That robe seems too thick." He smiled, holding my hand. "I was so focused on transcribing for you that I didn't even notice the heat." I felt my ears warm up and glanced at Jingqing. "There are people here, aren't you embarrassed?" Jingqing tried her best to suppress her smile and turned away, pretending not to see. Xianling just chuckled and was led by Xiao Yunzi to the inner hall to change his clothes. I went to the desk to organize the completed transcriptions for Xianling. As I was looking through them, I suddenly heard a burst of crisp laughter, like silver bells, coming from the doorway. Just as I was about to go out and see what was happening, the heavy brocade curtain was lifted, and a burst of cold air mixed with bell-like laughter came in. Chun'er stood in front of me holding a bunch of red plums, her face unable to hide her joy and pride, exclaiming, "Sister Zhan, Chun'er has just picked these red plums from a May garden. Do you like them?" She burst in like a gust of wind, causing Jin Shi, who was chasing after her, to turn pale with urgency. Unaware of the commotion she caused, Chun'er stamped her feet and rubbed her hands together, saying, "Sister, it's so warm here, it's freezing outside." Before I could signal her to be quiet, Xianling came out from the inner hall. Chun'er was startled to see Xianling but wasn't afraid. Her almond-shaped eyes, like two drops of black mercury in clear water, swiftly turned and she greeted with a beaming smile. "Does the Emperor like the plums I've picked for sister?" Since Chun'er was a common presence in my palace and was known for her innocence and cheerfulness, Xianling didn't find her arrival surprising. He smiled. "You're quite thoughtful. Your sister was just mentioning wanting to see the red plums, and here you are." He laughed. "Chun seems to have grown quite a bit taller." Chun'er tilted her head. "Your Majesty forgot, I'll be 15 after the new year." Xianling responded. "Indeed, your sister Zhan was also 15 when she entered the palace." I interjected. "Don't just stand there chatting, Chun'er. Brush off the snow from your clothes so you don't catch a cold later. Don't cry when it's time to take medicine." By then, Jin Shi had already taken Chun'er's red brocade cape lined with fur. Chun'er had grown quite a bit, her petite figure now more pronounced in her carmine red jacket, which was embroidered with precious baoxiang flowers in gold, bright green and treasure blue, radiating a joyful aura that complemented her round, delicate face. Chun'er wasn't intimidated by Xianling, continuing to joke around, which Xianling found endearing due to her naive charm. Although she hadn't been favored by Xianling, she was familiar to him. Chun'er laughed, her jade and emerald earrings swaying like droplets. "Sister, don't you have a white porcelain vase with ice crack patterns? It's perfect for the plum blossoms." Saying this, she went to fetch the vase with a giggle, eager to arrange the flowers. The plums Chun'er picked were either tightly budded or blooming in twos or threes, with strong, bold branches that looked almost sculptural. The blossoms, vibrant as rouge and fragrant as orchids, were indeed a sight to behold. The three of us admired and discussed the flowers for a while before Chun'er settled down by the brazier on a small stool. Her face lit up with joy as she slowly picked her favorite pastries to eat. I accompanied Xianling for a light meal and stood by his side to grind ink and moisten the brush. The warmth of the pavilion meant he wore only casual peacock blue satin clothes with a dragon pattern, making him look like a noble young master from a wealthy family, except for the bright yellow brocade belt with a white jade buckle that revealed his imperial status. Dressed casually myself in a pearl pink velvet embroidered jacket and with my hair loosely done up in a falling horse bun, secured with a simple gold hairpin, I stood by his side, ensuring the brush was well inked. When Xianling took the brush from me to write a few characters, he noticed a splash of ink on the back of my hand and naturally wiped it away with a piece of plain silk from the desk, as if such gestures had become second nature. I merely smiled softly, saying nothing. Chun'er, with a half-eaten piece of sugar-steamed curd in her mouth and another piece in her hand forgotten, watched us intently. After a moment she laughed and clapped, saying, "I couldn't figure out why watching the Emperor and sister together seemed so familiar. It's just like at home, where my sister and brother-in-law would be one grinding ink and the other writing, not speaking for ages, leaving me so bored." Her candidness embarrassed me, and I quickly interjected, "So you were bored? Here I thought we were neglecting you." "All right, I'll chat with you once I'm done with the ink." Chun'er, not to be silenced, was about to continue when I hurried over to pour her some tea. "After all those sweets, have some water to freshen up." Xianling then spoke up. "Huan Huan, Why don't you let Chunner finish what she was saying? He looked at Chunner with a smile, encouraging her. Go on, you can continue. I stomped my foot, embarrassed, and turned my head away, refusing to engage with them. Encouraged by Xianling, Chunner became even more enthusiastic, saying, my sister and brother-in-law, although they don't speak much, are very close and never argue. My mother says this is. She strained to remember, her face turning red with effort, until she finally recalled, exclaiming excitedly, yes, my mother says this is called the joy of the inner chamber. Hearing this, I felt both embarrassed and flustered and turned to say, Chunner, at such a young age, I don't know where you heard such nonsense. By indulging her in this way, you're only encouraging her further. Chunner, feeling wronged, pouted. I'm not spouting nonsense. It's exactly what my mother said. Your Majesty, do you think I'm talking nonsense? Xianling was laughing so hard he almost doubled over on the desk, repeatedly saying, of course not. How could it be nonsense? It's a very good point. He then reached out to hold my hand. This is how it should be between us. His hand was very warm, its heat enveloping my fingers. I smiled slightly, feeling a sense of peace and joy in my heart.
Follow us to avoid getting lost and enjoy endless exciting stories. For more content, please go to the Story Wall homepage to view more exciting novels.